Whenever I tell my friends who Todd Wiener is, I introduce him as the guy who organizes silent auctions for charity events. But he is much more than that. A true entrepreneur at heart and mind, he has developed his own business in charity event management with years of experience in fundraising and computer programming. Todd, have you always known that you would be an entrepreneur?
No, I don't think I've always thought of it, since I was a little kid. But when I was a little kid, I was doing entrepreneurial things. So, for example, when I was in middle school, I think I was like 12 years old. My mother took me to a computer store. Maybe I was 13. Took me to a computer store, which was a pretty new thing back then, and I was fascinated by the computer, so I ended up going there like every couple days. My mom would take me in the morning, drop me off, and I would spend the whole day like on one of their computers. And I taught myself how to program, and I taught myself how to use the computers. And back then, it was not like it is now with computers. You didn't just, everything's easy now. Like back then, you had to do everything yourself. If you wanted to print something, you had to create a program that would make the printer work. So that kind of thing was stuff that we did. And after a couple of years of hanging out there, they eventually gave me a job, and I worked there for a few years. And then even when I was in high school, that's when I learned to do database programming, and I started doing database programming for small businesses and people in the area. And what else did I do? I did some other kinds of programming. I just did computer work and help people with their computers. And for a kid, I made a lot of money. It was great because there was no competition. I was the only one in town who knew how to do this stuff. Oh no, it was all self-taught. I did eventually take a class at a local community college to learn COBOL, which is a computer language that is not widely used anymore. And I taught myself basic programming and Fortran and a whole bunch of other languages just by reading and copying other people. There was a computer class in my high school which taught basic programming, and I went into that class and was very bored because I was far more advanced than the teacher and the people in the class. So I just did I think I programmed an entire set of casino games during that class when they were asking us to do much more elementary stuff, and I liked it because the teacher, she hated me. She was a former nun, and she's very proper, and I was this obnoxious kid who thought he knew more than she did because I did, and 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 I was programming something that was it was gambling related. So I thought I was being very mischievous. But she and I fought a lot. And I remember once she said, it must feel really. She was sarcastic. She's like, it must feel such a burden to feel like you know more than everyone else in the room. Right? She said to me, and I was like, yes, Miss Tadigan, it is a burden.
She didn't
I
like
was
you.
I was such a jerk, but I took the class because it was the only thing that was offered, and
So as a teenager, you said you were selling some software to people. How did you start? Like,
yeah, I just through people heard that I worked at the computer store, knew about computers, and they asked me for help. I would set up their computers in their houses, and then I think it was the high school principal or the middle school principal. His family had a business in Brooklyn selling industrial wire, and he asked me if I could help them with some programming for their wholesale company. And I was like, sure, I can. So this was when I was 17, I think. And so I drove, I had a driver's license, and I would drive to Brooklyn, which is a whole mystery to me. I now live very close to where this job was, but it was, I'd never driven to Brooklyn before. I'd barely driven anywhere before because I just got my license, and I helped his company program whatever they needed to program. So that was a year-long project, and I made some good cash from that. Yeah. So all kinds of things I did for money. I had a paper route, but it was more than just the paper route. Like I had all kinds of jobs, but I had more importantly, I had all kinds of businesses and ventures and side things. Some of them were legal, some of them were not legal, but some of them were successful, some of them were not really that successful. But it's just something I've always done. And my father was a business person and a salesperson, so I think I learned a lot from watching him operate, and I helped him sometimes. So maybe I learned a little bit from my father, but I think a lot of it is just who you are and what what you're good at and what you're comfortable doing. So and then I went to college, and after I got out of college, I got a temp job at a nonprofit, a charity organization in the fundraising department. It was supposed to be a 2-week job, helping them with some report. And I ended up getting a job for 4 years at that place based on the work I did. And that's how I got into charity fundraising because I just got hired by the fundraising department. So it was completely random.
I see, yeah.
Completely random how I fell into that job path and that career. And I used some of my my computer skills and programming skills at that job and at other jobs, but mainly the job was, fundraising and writing grants and that sort of thing. So I learned on the job. But one thing, the temp agency that sent me to that place originally, I had gone to that temp agency because my girlfriend had previously gone to that temp agency, and she got some temporary jobs that she didn't like very much and weren't very well paid. And I went to that temp agency, I took their tests, and they sent me to this nonprofit, and she was jealous because she would have liked to work at that nonprofit, and they paid me more. And she was mad because she's like, they're paying you more because you're a guy, and that's not right. And I was like, no, they're not paying me more because I'm a guy. They're paying me more because of the tests that I took. And so they give you some tests for, typing or whatever, which she was fine and I was fine. But then they ask you a lot of questions about the skills that you have. And I answered yes on everything. I said I could do everything that they said, except for stenography, because that's a very specific skill that I did not have. But there's all this computer software and other things that she didn't know how to do, and I didn't know how to do. But I figured I could figure it out, so I just said yes. And then because of that, they put my application in a different color folder that got different jobs or the same jobs with higher pay. So the moral of that story was fake it till you make it.
You're not the first one who tells me that.
Yeah, that's the way it is, right? That's a lot of my story is that story. When I went into business, I didn't have a very specific plan about how my business was going to go, but I had been working in fundraising for 10 years, and I was tired of the job that I had, so I quit that job. And I tried to figure out what I was going to do. I didn't know what I was going to do. And I just did nothing for a few months after that last job. And then I ran out of money. I didn't have much money to begin with. But I ran out of my savings after 4 months, living in New York cheaply. And then I got another temp job working for a bank, like a big finance bank. They hired us to go do inventories of their computers. And I won't name the bank, but it was a Wall Street bank. And so I went down there for, I think it was 3 or 4 days. And we were going from office to office and doing the computer inventories. And on the 4th day, I could have kept doing this job. It was a big company. They had a lot of they had a lot of work for us. And I decided on that day, I either need to kill myself or quit this job and start a company because I cannot I cannot do another day of working in this bank counting computers. It's not, it's no good. So that's how I started my business. It was self-preservation and hating working for a temp agency that was counting computers at a bank. And so I started the company. I had no clients or any ideas exactly what I wanted to do. I had no clients for about a year and 3 months.
That's Aaron. That is Aaron Consulting.
Aaron Consulting Company. I started the company in 1997, and we first had a client in 1998 in February, March. And yeah, that whole year I was just doing like computer work here and there, and but I had my friends would make jokes because I would like get up and like do work, and I'd have a business card, and I had like a pencil sharpener and like things that you have in an office, but I had actually no actual work or clients. But eventually it came, and the business did okay for we're still in business 23 years later, 23 or 24 years later. So.
Nice. And so a big part of this work with your company was to organize auctions at charity events.
That came later. My original thing was, well, I've been doing fundraising, general fundraising for years, so I'll just sell those services as a consultant. But because I had been known for a big fundraising event that I had organized for my last job as a development director at a charity, I got some calls for that kind of work. So we just started doing events. And I did event fundraising for 10 years, the first 10 years of the company, or a little more, 12 years. But then along the way, I got into the auctions. First, I got into mobile giving through text messaging. I have a service called Text Giving.
Oh yeah.
I didn't invent it, but I was pretty early in this, and so this happened because I was at Denver's Broncos Stadium during the Obama acceptance speech. He was just got the nomination, and I was supporting that campaign. I went out there, and we're sitting in the stadium. There's like, I don't know, 60,000 people just sitting around all day waiting for the speech. And there's lots of other political speakers and some entertainment, and there's not a lot going on. But I remember on the screens, on the big jumbotrons, they had, volunteer for the campaign, text to this number, and you'll get signed up to volunteer. And so I was like, wow, what a great idea. I'd never seen that before. And I did sign up. But then when I got back, I turned that into a business. And so I started, and it turns out a few other people were already doing something like that. But I did it specifically for events. So you could raise money by, having people text in pledges and messages, and we put them on the screen. I programmed it it was very easy for me to set up. And that's been running since 2008, so 13 years. And I never thought it would last that long. And it's an important part of the story, which I'll get back to. But so we did that for a few years, and then we were running these events. And the events, when we run them, we do all the planning, we do all the fundraising. It's a big project. We spend 6 months on it, sometimes more. And then on event day, everything goes smoothly because you've done a lot of planning, and everything's organized, and you're ready to go. And we're good with databases and lists, so that helps with event planning. But we had a client that had an auction, and which we'd done a couple times before, but this is just something that we would organize for them because they asked us to organize it. And I remember the event was at a indoor racetrack for a museum, the children's museum, and we ran the event, and at the end of the event, the auction was over. It was a silent auction where people, were filling out bids on a sheet of paper, and the winner would come and pay, and they would get their stuff. And we had it pretty well organized, but it was all on paper. Everything was on paper. And my sister was there. My little sister was helping me with this event. And she, after the event was over, she's like, in all the preparations you do for these events, everything you do is on the computer. It's all computerized. It's all databases, everything. And then when you get to these events, it's all on paper. She's like, that seems stupid, is what she said. And I was like, it was because my little sister called me out that I built this whole system to run the events with computers, and we ran auctions on the computers, and I built a system for managing the events, and including to manage the auctions, but not the actual auction software that I eventually did. We did that for a couple of years, and then in 2010, I think, Apple announced that they were going to come out with the iPad, and I'd always used Apple computers, and I loved Apple computers, and I was like, that seems cool. I bet, and we had a client that was going to do an auction. I was like, I bet you could use this to run the auction. And there had been a couple other companies who had done stuff with computerized devices, but not iPads because they didn't exist. And I was like, we could do this, and I could just program this and make this happen. So I designed the software for the iPad to run the auction, but I didn't have an iPad, right, to test it on, because they weren't out yet. So I just made like this prototype of the software, guessing how it would work, and reading what I could find on the rumor sites about the device. And then on April 10th, 2010, the iPads came out, and I got 2 of them because you could only buy 2, and I put my software on there, and it didn't work at all. But I had already sold the idea to my client, and their event was 10 days later. So in those 10 days between April 10th and April 20th, I had to make the software work, which I did. I had to find 20 iPads, because that's how many I thought I needed to run this, because people were going to do the bidding on the iPads. And you can only buy 2 at a time, so I had to use like fake identifications to like represent that I was somebody else, or I'd send people, with cash. It was like I was buying VCRs in the Soviet Union, like in the black market. But I got the iPads, and then we hired a bunch of staff to help people bid with the iPads. And they had never seen an iPad before or our software. We trained them once or twice before the event. There wasn't time for much more. And we ran the event, and it went well. It worked. It did fine. And then we were off. And after that, I don't think we did that many events that year in 2010, but it was 30 or 40 events. But it took off quickly, and I've refined the software over the years and made it much stronger. We integrated the texting, so you could text with you could bid with the phone, and you could just text in your bid. And then we eventually added the website. That wasn't even part of that originally, but now we have a website from since 2012 as well, and it all works very, very well. So now we've done more than 1,000 of these events.
Wow. So how long does it take to make an event? Because you actually physically present at the event, right? Or at least your staff.
Yeah, I've been at 586 events
Really?
during the career of the company, in my career. And most of those were in the last 10 years since we started doing this. And how long does it take? Well, I mean, the event itself is 5 hours, and but the preparation, specifically the preparation for that event, we have a few phone calls with clients and to go over things. It doesn't take that long. Most of the time is getting them to get their catalog information to us, and we used to take that from them in a spreadsheet, or and then we put it in the system ourselves. But eventually, I built a website so they could do it themselves. But even that requires, a lot of customer support. So that's what takes the most time. On the day of the event, our equipment's all packed and ready to go the night before. We leave in the afternoon. We get to the event at 3:00. The events open at 6. The events finish at 10:30. We're out of there by 11. It's a long day, because you start the day at the beginning of a normal business day, and you're home at midnight, if you're lucky. If the event is not out of town. Because we've also done events in other cities where we've flown in. Sometimes we've had long drives afterwards. If they're in the New York metro area, I've done them. I've done events in Canada, all across the United States, Canada, and in the Caribbean. I did 3 events on Necker Island at Richard Branson's house, with Richard Branson in attendance. So that was fun. But it was also a huge pain, because we had to fly to St. Thomas, and then take a boat to Virgin Gorda, and then take a taxi over the mountain to the place we were staying, and then take another boat the next day to get to the place where we're having the event. It was pretty tiring, but it was spectacular. But can I say it was fun? It was fun the first year, but the second and third year was not really fun.
So the formula of having actually people walking around among guests, and then showing them the catalog on the iPads, is that your idea, or is it common in the industry?
That's my idea, and it's pretty uncommon. There are other companies that have done versions of that, or have used that when asked to, but mostly these are software companies that are selling their software and their services that way. We sell it because I run fundraising events. I think of it as an event, and I think of it as event management. And so it's all I provide customer service staff for the event, and we take care of the check-in and the checkout. We provide a lot of people. We always provided a lot more people than our competitors, and that was not very profitable for us, right? Because we also had to be competitive with them. We couldn't really charge that much more, even though we were bringing a lot of people. So that was a business challenge, but I felt it was important, because these are charities that are having one event. It's their big event, and a lot of them would try to hire our competitors and do this stuff themselves. Like, a lot of our competitors would send a tech support person and maybe somebody to train their volunteers, and they're like, it's not easy to do. It's not easy for us, and we do it all the time. It takes a lot of planning, a lot of organization, a lot of preparation, and you have to know how to do it. You have to know how to do all the things, including running the systems, but also selling the items to people. It's a lot of work. So that's the way I designed it, just because I thought it would be better, and it was successful. It was very successful, but we're not the most successful. They're much bigger companies who've been well funded, and who have done very, very well just selling the software and the services. It is something I had thought about doing, and I even started doing to prepare for a self-service model, but just isn't what I was interested in, really. I like having contact with humans, even though I like computers. So that's the way we built it, and it's done fine. And so then we've done, like I said, well over 1,000 of those events, and I've been at half of them. And we got to 2020 and the pandemic, and all of the events were canceled, of course, after March of last year. But I had all the pieces necessary to create virtual events with live auctioneers, and we just added the live stream production, which was really easy for us. I have a video production team anyway, and just software and running the software. So we learned how to do that very, very quickly, and prepared a virtual event product that we've now done. We did 60 events in this fall of last year.
Wow.
And we raised, I think they raised like $14 million for the clients. And it kept our company afloat. Without, if I hadn't done that, the pandemic would have probably ended the company. But I can't say we're thriving, but we're here, and we've got a lot of virtual events planned for this spring, and we'll probably do hybrid events where we're doing virtual events and live events together for a while, and then maybe straight live. We're not going to go back to the old ways exactly. Things they'll look different, I think, permanently. I'm not exactly sure how, but I keep changing the technology to adapt to what people need for these events. And so, for example, we used to have a full team of registration staffers at events, welcoming people and checking people in, greeting them, and it's incredibly helpful to have the staff do this function. You might think, oh, that's so easy, like somebody could just check someone off on a list or use an app, but it's not. There's a lot of preparation and knowledge, and we have a lot of not just computer systems, but ways of doing the business that can support the event, support the live auctions and things that we do at these events. But now with the pandemic, when people come back, I don't think people are going to want to, have like person-to-person check-in. So we've completely automated that. I already had a remote check-in system. We're going to have several variations of that so that it can be, completely contactless. Wow. We might have a few staffers around to help, but if 300 people are coming to an event, most of them don't need to talk to us. They can just go right in. They just need their table number, and we need to know they're there and maybe get their credit card on file for the auction. All of which we can do with apps. So it'll probably look like that.
Well, definitely congratulations, because for an event company, it's really hard to go through the COVID times, and so you have reinvented yourself again.
It was necessary, and thanks. I mean, it was invigorating for me, actually, because I get bored easily, and so this was like something new to try, but it was not completely different. It was just a new version of what we were doing. And I did it with an auctioneer named Pat Tully, who I work with. I've worked with for years. He's a really good live auctioneer, but we worked together to make the systems for the live auctions that we would do, because we would present Pat, or other auctioneers, but mainly Pat, at these events live. And he would do a call to action for people to make donations. And the way they made those donations is by text messaging. So he used the text giving system that I invented, in 2008. And it was perfect for this. It was perfect. But getting the timing right for a virtual presentation and working with the auctioneer and having him be able to react to text messages come in, that took practice and more practice with Pat, our auctioneer, and tweaking the systems and the way we displayed things so that it would work for him. And that makes a big difference too. So I've seen a lot of other events where they try to do the live appeal with a live auctioneer, but it's just not coordinated well. Sometimes just the auctioneer is not that great, but a lot of times it's because they're not managing it properly. And then, in my view, and then, there's a whole lot of other stuff, like with, just being able to follow up with the donors, collect their money, and make sure it's easy for them. So we've always had good systems for that, and that's we try to focus on the guest experience when it's a live event, and the viewer experience when it's a virtual event, because I think that's the most important thing that we're providing. And we also want to make it easier for the charities to run these events so that they can do other things at the events, like talk to their guests. That's the second most important thing. But the most important thing is the customer and guest experience. So I try to make that as seamless as possible. And if they're happy, then they give money, and then the charity's happy, and they hire us again. That's how that's the business model.
Just to quickly, touch on the other aspects of your life as an entrepreneur, because you don't have all your eggs in one basket. Can you tell us about your recent investments and also your recent idea in Mexico?
Well, I'm doing this interview from Oaxaca, Mexico, which is the center of the mezcal production Mezcal is an agave-based liquor that is the fastest growing category of spirits in the United States, and it's also increasingly popular in other parts of the world. It's from Mexico. It can only come from certain parts of Mexico, from certain plants, agave plants from Mexico. It's like champagne can only be champagne from Champagne, but it can be sparkling wine from other places. But here it's strictly from particular regions. And I have been coming to Mexico for the last 6 years. I invested in some hospitality businesses in 2014. So I've made 50 trips to Mexico in the last 6 years. The biggest one was in March of last year when I came for what was supposed to be 4 days, but stayed for 3 months because it was the pandemic. So that worked out pretty well. But now I'm launching a mezcal brand, and I'm partnering with a producer here in Oaxaca, a young guy who's his family's been in the business for a couple generations. All his brothers are producers. His dad was a master producer. And he needed capital, and I needed someone who knew how to make mezcal, and so we were introduced. And he makes amazing mezcal. It's a really, really good, a great product. So we're launching that in I think May or June. We don't know exactly because mezcal, everything takes time. It's all handmade. And there's also a lot of regulations in Mexico and in the United States for importing. And I've never done this before. I have no idea how to do any of it. So we've made a few mistakes along the way. Those mistakes have been more costly in time than money, but they have cost some money. But it's part of the process of learning the business, and it's part of the fun in doing the business. To make the mistakes, like if you don't make the mistakes, you're not doing the job yourself. You're having other people who know what they're doing do everything, which isn't what I'm interested in. I'm interested in discovering as much as I can about this. And the entrepreneurship here is not so much inventing something new, because there's many others have come before me making and selling this stuff. But the entrepreneurship is just being able to take that risk and that leap of faith that you can figure it out. So it's back to the fake it till you make it mantra.
When I remember when we were talking last year, and I was saying, "How are you doing?" And he said, "Yeah, I'm not doing very well." And so, but you sounded so calm and at peace. So I wonder, is it your character? Is it you, or have you learned to become zen over things? And does an entrepreneur have to have that?
There are a lot of different very successful entrepreneurs who I would not describe as calm. I'm pretty. I have a pretty even keel. I always have. I'm not in any businesses that are life and death situations. There's pressure, but there's never a fundraising auction emergency that someone's life is balance here. It's like, well, maybe we raise more or less money for our charity. That's the worst thing that can happen. So and also when running events, it's like it's a party. You're running a party, so like things will go wrong, but most things go right, and everyone should just relax and have a good time. And but I do think part of it is just my personality and my studied calm. I've been in a lot of high pressure situations at live events. And by keeping my calm, I've been able to fix problems that came up, which I don't think everybody could do. And you would think that being that calm would put others at ease, but sometimes it's the opposite effect. When they see you, like when your clients see you be really calm when things are not working properly, that sometimes gets them more upset. So sometimes I have to hide from them and fix the things rather than engage with them. That's something I've learned over the years. At the end of the day, the most important thing is that things go well, and there'll be time for calming people down later once you get the things fixed. We had early on when I built this auction system. You heard the story of how I created it, but there were a lot of problems, and I would try to make improvements and change things between events. Then we get to the event and I'd find that I'd broken something and it wasn't working. So sometimes I would do the fixes during the event. Often I would do, especially in the first couple of years. And that is a high wire act when the software isn't working and you have people in a room that are relying on it, and you got to get it fixed before they start bidding or before the auction ends or whatever it is. And I did it many times. There was, including one time when it wasn't even something that we broke. It was like a worldwide website problem that happened once, which was crashing our systems. And that one I had to fix in real time by like tearing code out of my system and putting code back in while the event hadn't started. It was like an hour before the event had started. I had no idea whether we could get it running or not, but we did. That required a lot of calm.
If you had one suggestion to make, one advice to give of all the advices you could give to an entrepreneur, up-and-coming entrepreneur, what is it?
Be ready to fail, and don't let that failure stop you from pursuing your goals and your dreams, because failure it's inevitable. It's going to happen. It's going to happen to everybody at some point, probably multiple times. I failed many times at many things I've tried, and if you're smart and you're committed, you learn and you get better and you fix it. So you really want to, apply what you've learned. So at my company, we do that all the time. After every event, we have besides our wrap up with the client and meetings and talking about how things went, we have an internal reviews of everything, all the processes, what worked, what didn't, was there something broken that needs fixing? Is there something that could be better? We question everything, and including me and my work, and that's how we get better. And I've had a lot of employees who have complained about systems. This would be better if we did this, and we should try this, and it's great because a lot of times they're right. Sometimes they're wrong, but usually they're right. And if you have the kind of people working with you that are just kind of satisfied with how things are going, that you're not going to get anywhere. So you got to take the risk. Things could fail. You might lose the business or the client or whatever. That bad things can happen, but only if you try. If you don't try, nothing bad will happen, and nothing good will.
That's very well said.
So failure is key. Being able to handle it and learn from it.
Be ready to fail. Reinvent yourself when circumstance requires it. Don't let failure stop your dreams. Thank you, Todd, for your job tale.